All right. Well, super excited to have everybody here tonight. Tonight, we're going to go through the building blocks of your resume. Really excited that we have some REAP advisors here to join us at the beginning of tonight's session and throughout. And so in today's workshop, we're going to welcome our REAP advisors. We're going to have a little panel discussion about the importance of resumes and then go through a couple different group activities and how to use powerful verbs, how to quantify your experiences, and then tips to complete your assignment. So with that, I'd love to welcome the REAP advisors. I guess we can start if anyone just wants to unmute, we can go around. REAP advisors quickly say hello and introduce yourselves, and then we can jump into the panel discussion.
Sure, happy to kick us off. My name is Jen Burdick. I'm a REAP advisor, second year, getting my MBA at Columbia Business School. Really excited to work with many of you who I now recognize. But yeah, excited to speak to you guys today about resumes.
Hi, I'm Sarah, also REAP advisor, second year business school student. I have a background in healthcare, and I'm happy to be here. Happy to meet you all.
Hi everyone, I'm Filippo. Same as Sarah and Jennifer. I'm second year Columbia Business School MBA student and excited to be here and have background in strategy consulting.
Awesome. Really appreciate everybody joining tonight. Like I said, we're going to go through just a panel discussion over the first half hour, 45 minutes of tonight, really to get some perspective from our REAP advisors on the importance of resumes and kind of how that has worked through your whole process, both from applying to business school, but then especially as thinking about next step after business school. So I'd love to just hear, and again, feel free, any of you, to unmute about kind of how you view the process of building a resume in terms of, getting it together, quantifying your experiences, what that approach was like, kind of business school, pre-business school, and then now thinking about next steps.
I went last, I can go first here. Regarding the process of building the resume, I think it is like, for me, it's a bit like also a way before starting the resume to think a little bit about your experiences, your skills, and what is the relevant experiences and skills that you have, and how they are going to help looking forward. So I think it's a bit both the process looking back, but also looking forward, and having that in mind, I think help then drafting the resume, and trying to get some messages delivered through the way that you draft the resume. And then, I mean, that's, I think, overall a little bit of how I was thinking about my resume when I was drafting before coming, business school and before, and also how I updated the resume now that I'm in business school. Just like this as a mindset overall for drafting the resume, and then there are of course many components, but I mean, I don't want to go too much in detail now, so maybe I'll give the room to Jennifer or Sarah if they...
Yeah, I agree with Filippo. I think what I would add is, just really tailoring your resume for the job that you're looking for. So, taking on your relevant experience or anything that might be maybe a transferable skill, but really tailoring it towards what you're looking for, because then the recruiters will notice your resume more. So depending on the type of job that you're looking for, or for us, like when we were applying to school, that resume looked very different to the resume that we're working on now for future roles after school. So just really knowing what your goal is in building out your resume before you start.
Yeah, I think one of the common pitfalls in building a resume for the first time is simply putting a description, like a job description. So saying that you managed a process or oversaw a group of people, you really want to think about what did you do in that job that was unique that someone else who did the same job maybe couldn't say. And that's always easier in hindsight, the further you are away from being in that role. Which leads me to my next point. This is going to be a living, breathing document. So there's never a point in time where you're just done with your resume. You're always going to be adding new projects, even as you think about your past work. So there are bullets on my resume from 6 years ago that I now have a different sort of understanding of the impact that that project had, or want to phrase it in a different way. So it's not just every time you do a new project, but always going to revisit it, because while something may felt really mundane and monotonous while you were doing it, you may have felt like, oh my God, anyone could do this. That's not true. And how you talk about that, the further you are away, can sometimes be easier. So I'd just encourage you to always look back, even if it was from 5, 10, 15 years ago, and think about sort of what was actually the impact of that role, and try and steer clear of just saying sort of what was the job description, but really what did you as an individual contribute in that role?
Yeah, that's super helpful, Jennifer. Sarah, you were mentioning kind of the idea of tailoring a resume to a specific job that you're looking for. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about what that process is like, right? In terms of thinking, okay, what is that job looking for? How to identify what they are? And then again, thinking about how to represent your experiences in a way that's in line with those expectations.
Yeah. I think, relevant to this group, learning how to code and wanting to apply to software engineering roles, and whether you have experience with that already or you don't, if you're looking for a software engineering role and I'm looking at your resume, I would want any experience you have related to that to stick out. So just putting more emphasis on maybe the JTC program or whatever experience you had while you were at JTC relevant to software engineering. It doesn't have to be a job. It's just like knowing where to put more emphasis on the experience that you've had. And then if you've had, even with other roles, you can, highlight any project that you owned, or just like building it out in a way that it'll stick out to the recruiter as you have experience maybe with different roles, but you also know how to code. I guess that kind of goes into like changing career paths or whatnot, but like really focusing on what you want to stick out in your resume and making sure that I don't know if that really answers the question. It's kind of vague without examples, but.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, have you, in that process, have you looked at maybe job descriptions of roles that you're thinking of applying to, or, observed industry trends to think about how to list those bullet points within the resume?
Yeah, I think job descriptions are a really good place to start. They all list like the skills that you need for that job and the strengths that they're looking for. And when I've applied for jobs, I've definitely, even in interviews, mentioned words that they mention in the job description or in your resume, mentioning the verbs that they might have mentioned, or I think that's a really good point to add.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, for any of the three of you, when you think of what really makes a resume stand out from the crowd, kind of, if you have any thoughts there.
Yeah, I think some of the resumes that stand out really highlight sort of the impact that you had. And it's great if it can be quantifiable. It doesn't always have to be dollars and percents improvement, but I think showing sort of sometimes in the absence of you not being there, nothing happened. And that's great. So if you had to check labels to make sure nothing went out that was expired, maybe the impact was nothing, but that in and of itself is great because nothing happened. Had you missed one, it would have caused sort of a huge human health outbreak. costing a lot of dollars and sort of human impact. So I think just thinking critically of what impact do you have, even when sometimes it seemingly there was no sort of dollar impact at the time, but you did something that prevented sort of a casualty, a calamity, a issue. So it's just always like thinking about the different angles. I'd say one way to not stand out in your resume, which is counterintuitive, but is in the design of it. Oftentimes people that I see and work with in the MBA want to have a unique format because it's how you're going to stand out amongst a stack of resumes, and that makes total sense. But actually the standardization of a resume is really helpful to a recruiter and will signal that it's from a professional institution where you've sort of received that guidance. So I know that that's a hard thing for a lot of us to wrap our head around, because design and creativity and colors is a great way to stand out normally. And so you kind of have to retrain your brain that actually having it look exactly the same as everyone else is easier for the recruiter and signals sort of a level of professionalism.
Yeah, definitely appreciate that advice, Jennifer. I think it is counterintuitive, but something that we see a lot. And I think also, you know, for someone like, I'm thinking when I've had to review resumes for candidates in different roles that I've been hiring for, being on an ATS on the back end, you really want to make it as easy as possible for the person, the hiring manager, the recruiter to be able to look at those. Because I think when I've gone through it, I'm reviewing 50 resumes at a time, right? And so you want something that's going to make it easy on that person, that's in a similar format than everybody else. And I think, again, that can be somewhat counterintuitive. And I think the one thing maybe to add is, I think where we've seen that be a little bit different is maybe if somebody's applying for a role as a designer, or, you know, something that is in a more artistic, creative field. But I think for all the roles that we're talking about, it is pretty standardized. And so there's, you know, a couple of formats to go through. And just for a general word for all the students here, that, you know, we standardize on the CBS format, and then we do create technical resumes later on that's slightly modified from that format, but it's very similar. It was really, as was pointed out here, this is really a living document. And so what we're working through now is making sure we have that initial version to really move forward with. I'm wondering if anybody has any thoughts on kind of why it's so challenging to get a resume right, or what has been challenging for you.
I can speak to this. I think sometimes when you're, so what I mentioned earlier, when you're really close to the job, what you take for granted how unique your position is or what you've done and your contribution. So it can be really helpful talking it through with someone else. So in your own words, describe what you did, see how they interpret your job. Sometimes there's sort of two things. We don't see our job as always valuable because we learned quickly and then sort of went into autopilot mode. But there were a lot of like key learnings in there. And so having someone else help pull those out of you is really helpful. And second, it can be hard to know how much description to put in, or what's industry jargon, what words are someone else going to be familiar with, or how do you talk about sort of a project or a company that someone may know nothing about. So that's, again, where having someone who's less familiar with the industry or job that you're in can help sort of sense check how much description you need, and if someone else will be able to read that bullet and then tell you back in their words sort of what they think your job was. And then that's a good sense for if that bullet is good. But it's really hard to do on your own, and you need to get a lot of different inputs and feedback from people. So it has to be a really collaborative process.
Yeah, I totally agree. And maybe just adding to building on a point that already been said. So the point on quantifying, I think, like, also remembering when I was drafting updating my CV, my resume recently, I think before business school, trying to quantify and show the impact, which is fundamental, as Jennifer mentioned before, I think can be sometimes challenging if you hadn't done it like continuously, maybe over you know, the projects that you've done, over the various activities that you've done, because maybe you have you know, been doing a project for 6 months, you have done many activities, and you have maybe to summarize in 1 line, 2 lines, bullet point, all the things that you did. And it's not that easy to understand what you should write and how you can measure the impact. So I think it can be like, for me, when I was doing that, I actually also literally went back to project documents, to documentation of past projects that I've worked on, like to actually go back and see, because maybe it was maybe 1 year back, and so I went back to see the activities that I did, to see actually if what was the project about, if there was some number, some impact that I could mention in the resume. So I think doing it for the first time, it maybe takes a little bit more time, but then looking forward, see doing the resume, you update it now, but then in 1 year, in 2 years, you're gonna update again. You never know, in 2 years, 10 years, 5 years, I don't know, you're gonna maybe look again for a new job, so you're gonna need your resume there. I think it can also be like a good habit, basically, when you do projects or activity, to have kind of these noted down, maybe in the same folder that you have a resume. You say, okay, I have this project, my key takeaway or my key activity, my impact was this one. And so you never know, but you're prepared when when the time comes in the future to update again the resume. Then I think it's going to be very helpful for that. It's a bit looking forward, but I think in time is going to be helpful.
I agree with Filippo on that. I think for me, what's been the hardest is it's 2 things. It's one thing, just talking about myself and my accomplishments is never an easy thing to do. I think for some people it's easier than for others. So, being confident in talking about what you've accomplished is something that you have to work on when you're building a resume. But then sometimes when I've built my resume in the past, I've kind of had the mindset of, well, what did I actually do at my job? And I don't know. I don't know what to write. I don't know what to say about myself. I don't really know what I did. And so having conversations with people just about my job and just having them ask me questions and then me answering them and realizing, oh, I actually did things. And, not all of these were because I was on a team. It's because I did it. So I can say that I did it on the resume. And just like talking to people about your experience, I think for me has been really helpful, just in synthesizing in my brain what I've done and what I've learned, to then put it on paper. Or being proactive is probably the best way to do that. Like while you're working and while you're learning new things, just jotting it down somewhere, and then later you'll be able to add that back into your resume.
Yeah, all great points. I feel like I personally have tried to, like, once a quarter go back and quantify things that I'm working on, because it is so hard afterwards. And I think also then when approaching projects, trying to keep that in mind ahead of time. And I think for our students here too, as well, for those that move on to the flagship program, we'll do work on open source software projects. And so you get some experience, right, where you'll be able to have some quantifiable data about an impact that you had on a larger project, right? And I think that is really something that's really integral to making that transition into this as a full-time career. I'm wondering, and if none of you have any thoughts, I certainly have a lot of thoughts here, but in terms of how to address gaps on a resume or kind of structuring of that resume, if it's something that you've thought about at all.
One thing that's I've noticed different about some templates that I've seen floating around is you can just put years on a resume. So sometimes some templates have months and year to define sort of how long you were at a job. But if you want to just put years, that can sometimes help as well if there are a few months in between. Also on the JTC format, there's a nice opportunity at the front to sort of talk about yourself and tell your story a bit. So that can be another great opportunity to sort of talk about your skills, sort of give a little bit of your life intro, but also talk about in some of the gaps, like what were you doing in between, even if it wasn't sort of professional in nature, or if it was educational certification, even if it was like you were able to pursue a hobby at that time, or I know some people you can sort of work on a skill like penmanship at any point. So just sort of using some examples of how you spent that time at other points can be helpful.
Yeah, I was about to mention also, I had in mind again, like the summary that you can have there, but that you mentioned at the beginning of the resume, that actually can be very helpful. It's gonna be the first thing that the person reading your resume is gonna look at. So I think if you are able to give a message there, then I think it gets the attention there also, and then maybe then if there is some gap, I think that can be very helpful. And also I think think creatively about the experiences that you're going to have in the resume, because in general you can be like selective. Maybe you have like many experience, so it's not like having a resume having just a list of everything that you did, but it's also being selective with the things that are actually relevant for you, for your experience, for your skills, and for the skills that are transferable and relevant for the job that you're applying to. But also in being selective, I think also, as Jennifer was mentioning, like kind of think creatively a little bit outside the box. Maybe it was not just something that, some experience that you had that maybe doesn't go like on the professional experience part. Maybe you expanded on the additional information part. There are more sections onto the resume. And so I think that also, think creatively about also if you can add something in the other parts of the resume. I think that's going to be good, and those can be also talking points eventually during the interview, and also ways to to connect with the interviewer, and I think that can be also helpful.
All great points, and I'll add a couple things as well. We work through the format within our standardized resume. I think one of the things that we've seen for people is, let's say, at the end of the flagship, you'll have multiple projects that you've worked on. You'll be working on open source software projects. And so that'll give you a whole couple things that you can list there, right? And we think a lot about sequencing as well, right? So if you have a pretty significant gap in your resume, the goal of the resume is to have one page, right? And so you're able to put those projects and then maybe some work experience under that. So there are ways to address this. The one thing that I will kind of add to that is there is no one size fits all policy here, right? If somebody spent 2 decades incarcerated, their approach is going to be very different than someone that spent a year. And even if that person spent a year, if they had no work experience before their incarceration and then came into our program, that's even going to be different than somebody that had a bunch of work experience, right? And so I think that this is, why we start this so early and spend so much time on it, is it just really is a document that we want you to iterate over many, many times. I think, as all of our guests can speak to here, this is something that in the professional world we just have to do probably dozens of times and spend many, many hours going through. But it's that time that'll help it refine it and really get to a version that will put you in a good shape for the job search process. And that's also why we have another section in terms of how to address resume gaps within interviews, right? Because there may be situations where that's just going to come up and you have to be prepared to answer that question. And there are some clear strategies there. So I wouldn't allow, a lot of people get concerned about that, but I think it's actually something that you can allow to be seen as a strength, as long as you're able to handle that, right? Especially because people understand that's a question that puts a lot of pressure on others, and if you're able to answer that in a thoughtful way, it can be a really strong thing in the interview process. Last question from me. I'd love to hear how a resume can help with career transitions. I don't know how many of you are switching careers after MBA, or if everybody's going back to the same one, but I know that's super common, right, within the business school experience. And so I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, maybe I can start with an input, and maybe Sarah and Jennifer can add. When I mentioned like being selective with the experiences, I think that, and being a little bit also creative, I think it can help with the transition in highlighting, what are going to be the transferable skills that you've developed in past experiences, and that you have, because maybe like for instance, I have experience and the same type of industry with the same company since I graduated from college. aspiring in case transition to new industry, I think, while you go through your experience, you can change some word, also just some word, some action, or like look at the project that you did, or the work that you did under maybe different angles that are gonna be maybe more, that is gonna be maybe more relevant to the job that you're targeting. I like to give maybe specific examples so that hopefully can be helpful. Like for instance, in my case, I was working in consulting, so basically with clients which are companies, and we were working with these companies and did like many different projects that span from evaluating investment into new company or launching a new product. If I am to switch to a career, I don't know, in finance, where in private equity, where companies like are to invest into new companies themselves, maybe I can highlight in the bullet point on the description of the activity that I did. I can highlight more this aspect because it was maybe closer to the job that I'm gonna eventually be doing in this new company. So maybe in the same job, in the same project, in the same activity, I did many different activities. But maybe if you want to highlight some specific activities that you did, you can select those activities and also try to find different action verbs or words or ways to quantify the impact that you did that are going to be maybe more relevant to your target industry if you're transitioning. So you can if financial analysis skills are more relevant for the new job compared to marketing skills, maybe if you work on launching a new product, you have a bullet point that highlights more how you did the analysis of the financials of the new product compared to how you created the features of the new product to attract more customers. So you're gonna maybe shape the bullet points and the activity that you're gonna input and you're gonna have on the resume in a way that you can highlight the skills and that are gonna be more relevant for your target industry.
Yeah, I think also for the resumes that I've seen so far, you're including a summary section, which I think is really helpful when you're looking for a new role, just to highlight your passion for the role that you're looking for and just really highlight what you're looking for. You could also highlight certain certifications that you're working on or the program that you're in currently in that summary section, because I'll be quite honest, most people don't read a full resume. So when you look at someone's resume, if there's too much information, someone's probably not going to read anything. If there's just the right of information, they're just going to read whatever sticks out. If there's a summary section, they will read that, especially if it's not too long, and then they'll kind of skim the rest. So I think working on that summary section and really like making it targeted towards what you're looking for is very valuable. Also, there's some really good conversation in the chat right now, but there is opportunity to, and Sandra spoke about this in the chat, but ask ChatGPT what a transferable skill is that you have based on the skills that you already have and what role you're looking for. I think there is opportunity to find some help in AI today. I'm not an AI expert or anything, and so use it, sparingly, or use it, question things that it tells you to do. But I think it's really helpful to generate ideas when working on your resume.
Yeah, I think if I could just quickly add to that, I think sometimes taking like a step back to just see, I may not have all of these specific skills that they're looking for, but if the skill is going to require problem solving or sort of like learning a new skill, how can you demonstrate those qualities from what you have done? Because there's a lot of different ways that you can show that you've solved a problem or been a self-starter and taken initiative to learn something new or find a different way to do something. That's sort of the approach that I took, because I didn't have all of the necessary skills, but I wanted to convey on my resume that I'm naturally curious. I like to think about problems in a creative way, and I was detail oriented because I knew that those three things were going to be really important and hopefully convey that even if I don't know how to use Excel as well as another candidate, I'm going to figure it out on the job. So sometimes you don't have to know everything from day one. You just want to convey that you're someone who will figure it out, who will go the extra mile to learn, who will show up, sort of be the first one in. There's a lot of intangible skills that you can convey on a resume, and it doesn't necessarily need to be sort of everything from day one. You just want to show sort of your commitment moving forward.
Yeah, huge +1 to what you just said, Jennifer. I'm actually thinking of something meeting that we had earlier today. So we're referring a group of 10 alumni to a software engineering apprenticeship at Microsoft right now. And one of the things that the talent team at Microsoft has said is that they want to see people who are continually committing every day, and also where they're, even if they're in a job where they're doing this outside of work, because they are that curious and they want to see that people are really engaged, that they would be doing this even if it was not work, right? And I think that that's something that when you're thinking about the resume is very important, but it's also, when we have this conversation, it's grounding in how do you take what you know about the resume and also think about what that means in terms of how you're approaching your work on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, right? Because you want to be building those new skills, you want to be able to be showing that, and you really need a way to show that curiosity outside of work, right? Because in reality, in today's labor market, that's not enough if it's in work, right? And you got to be able to do that. Partially being in this program does that, right? But then the question is, how do you continue that afterwards? I think those are all of the questions that I have from my end. I know we have a couple minutes left for the panel, so if anybody has any questions that they would like answered, feel free to raise your hand. I want to make sure that they're relevant again to the experiences of our panel, but happy to take a couple minutes, maybe the next 4 or 5 minutes to do that, and then I'll hand it over to Lana and we'll move to the next part of the evening. Wesley.
Hi, and thank you so much for this lecture. Thank you so much for your time. We're all, like I said, us, like I said, within this cohort, we're all looking to transition, or at least, for whatever, like I said, whatever purposes, build upon our resume, knowing, say, the education part, like how much is education a factor, how much is experience a factor when we go to build out our resumes, and how do we focus our resume to be the most optimal for the positions that we're looking for.
I think there may not be a one size fits all answer to this, because some people will have more education to talk about than others, and maybe they have more life experience and they really want to highlight that, whereas someone may not have as much quote unquote professional experience, but they have certifications and training and sort of programs that they participate on the education side, so they want to highlight that. You could sort of think about it as there's going to be people who spend 10 years becoming a doctor, and so they have a lot of education but maybe not as much sort of professional experience. So someone who's been in the workforce for 10 years versus 10 years of education, one's not better than the other. It's just going to be a different way to sort of talk about yourself. So I wouldn't view the absence of one to be an issue, especially if you can sort of talk about how you've sort of compensated for it in life experience, and if not life experience, you've pursued sort of learning in a different way. So you don't have to have a perfect balance of both, and some may have sort of more of one than the other.
And or Sarah, were you going to say something? Sorry.
I was just gonna say that I think it also depends on the role that you're applying for. I think that's when job descriptions are really helpful, because if they absolutely need you to have a certain certification or a certain education and they put that as a requirement on the job description, then that's a tell whether you have it or not, whether you'll apply or not to the role. So I think looking at job descriptions is really helpful in that sense. And a lot of the time they're really asking for skills or, you know, describing the job. So then tailoring your resume towards that based on the experience that you have, is completely fine.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. So Wesley, if it's all right, I could take you as an example, right? So I know you're currently working, right? But if we were to say, if you're not, right, you completed our data analytics course, you're now doing this. Let's just assume that you do the flagship, right? Those are 3 programs that, and let's say you had no work experience before. Those are 3 programs that you could list at the top. And then you have the data analytics project that you did, right? And then you'll have at least a couple more from the flagship. And then you'll have some open source software projects. That could cover a whole page, right? And so I think that that's why we have the length of the programming. That's why we focus in this way, so that you can have some of those experiences to draw upon. Now, if in your case, like you have some work experience that could certainly be framed in a way, problem solving, you know, more technically minded, that in that case, you would include that in there, right? But maybe that's not the first thing that you're listing, because this role is looking for a year of software engineering experience. And then you're probably going to put those software engineering projects up at the top, because those are going to be your equivalent experience, right? And then that's how you're going to sell yourself in that process. And so I think both what Jennifer and Sarah said in terms of this is not one size fits all, and it's really about bringing those things together in the context of the job description. I can think as well for this software engineering apprenticeship at Microsoft, they're not expecting anybody to have any work experience going into it, right? And so that resume is going to be very different than maybe something where you're trying to show work experience. Maybe you don't have it, but you have these projects. That GEA project that you did was fantastic. You were collaborating with multiple other people on it. You were managing deadlines. There's a lot of things, right, that are transferable there. And so I think that it's every single part of what we're doing here is designed in a way so that you can use it within your resume. We'll take one more question from Eddie, and then I'll hand it over to Alana.
Okay. Yeah, I want to also say thank you for sharing tonight. It's much appreciated. A question I had is, in the past, I had kind of thought about this whole matter of resumes and job searches in terms of like job descriptions at particular companies. And relatively recently, I became really aware of like the whole recruiting aspect, especially in like the tech world and recruiters. And some of the panelists mentioned recruiters several times. And I was curious to know, it's kind of clear, like in terms of like a job description and a posting, how we can kind of measure what the expectations are, but how do recruiters fit into our constructing of our resumes?
I can start and then welcome anyone to chime in. A lot of times how I've known the process to work is there's someone inside the company who needs this role. And so they're going to work with the recruiter, who typically sits in HR, talk about what sort of technical capabilities they mean, like who do they need in this role on their team, and will help them write the job description. Then it's on the recruiter to sort of sift through the resumes based on the description that the team has sort of collaborated and given them. So a lot of times they're the ones who's going to be the first sort of touch point with a candidate, doing like an HR screen, is sometimes what they're called. So it may not be asking you specific questions about the role, but just asking you a bit about your resume to make sure it'd be a good fit to then talk to the next person on the team. So I still think there's a bit of the resumes, like the first filter, especially if you're applying to sort of a job just online without a direct contact to reach out to. If there is a direct contact and that person is likely the recruiter, it's a great opportunity to try and set up time and put a face behind the resume, so that you're not just words on a page, but you can actually introduce yourself. It's not always possible. You may not have the name sort of available online, but if you can track down who's likely the HR representative who's posting this role, trying to see if they're available for a 15-20 minute chat if they don't sort of proactively reach out, can work, and it's just a nice way for them to sort of know who's behind the resume. Sarah, Felipe, I don't know if you guys have any other experience with recruiters.
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally agree with what you said, and yeah, I mean, it's that they are probably the first person to see your resume, and many times, you know, they do a full screening, of course, with matching the what's in the job description. So that's how you want to think about it, as Sarah highlighted the importance of the job description. Yeah, and I think, as Jennifer said, I think it's a good opportunity. You know, most of the time I think recruiters are on the HR, and so many times they are available. So I don't know, maybe you send the application even just to check in after some time, to, you know, maybe also if there is an email available, just also it can be good just to check in, or if there is a phone number and call to say, hi, I sent my application, I just wanted to know, you know, checking in with the process, how is it going, and if, you know, I think it's it's a good no, it's a good way to start the relationship, you know, with the company, also with the recruiter, and eventually yeah, as Jennifer said, I totally agree. I mean, putting a face, I think it can also make a difference if there are, you know, other resume which equally valuable. You know, if there is a, you know, human touch, and if they saw that also that you are committed, that you really care about it, I think that can make a difference, because it shows only in the way that you send the application and the way that you then reach out again. Maybe it shows that you're actually committed, that you're really interested into it, maybe compared to someone else that send their resume but they didn't follow up, you know. So that can be also totally totally agree with Jennifer, that can be actually helpful.
I'll add one thing for you, Eddie. I think the traditional approach of applying to as many jobs as possible is not a great one, right? And I think, you know, if the number is around somewhere around 80% of jobs are found through within someone's network, right? And so I think a lot of what that means, and I actually think one of the huge differentiators being an MBA student, being a part of Columbia Business School, is business school sort of teaches you to build that network and to have somebody to reach out to, so you have a warm introduction in a company, right? And so I think when you get to that stage, it's really about what are those target 20, 30, maybe 40 companies that you're going to go after? How do you build a relationship with somebody at each of those companies, or get connected to one of them through someone that you're connected on LinkedIn? And then that allows your resume to get flagged, right? And I think one of the things here is it's about, in my mind, you need to be as good as the top 10% of resumes so that you're not pulled out of the pile, right? And then after that, there are other steps that you need to take in terms of getting that warm introduction. I'll use this Microsoft program as an example again. They're allowing us, anybody that has a contact at Microsoft, to flag their resume, and then that increases the chances that they get pulled in for interviews, right? And I think that if you think about it, if you have a friend that tells you, oh, this is a great person, you're going to trust that more than just a person off the street, right? And I think that is the reality, for better or worse, of the recruiting process. And so, again, I think there's all these moving parts. The resume is a really central part of it, but then there are all these other steps that you have to go through to really increase your chances there. With that being said, really appreciate the time tonight on our panel. I know if our REAP advisors want to stick around, we will have some breakout rooms to jump into. But with that, again, we'd love to say thank you again for joining. I know it was super informative for everybody. And I will pass it off to Alana.
Do we have time to take a quick 5-minute break? Do we feel like we need one? Should we do 5 minutes and come back? Is everybody okay with that? All right, so
Good.
let's head back. I'm gonna make it 4 minutes for you guys, just for a nice even time. I'll be back at 7:20, and I will queue up my slides, and then we'll get into some breakout rooms shortly thereafter. All right, I'll see y'all back in a few. Alrighty, 7:20, so everybody can hop back on with me. Right now, is everyone seeing my screen, my slides? Yes. Okay, excellent. You guys know I struggle a little bit when I'm using two monitors, but we're gonna get started here. So so far, I think up until this point, we've kind of focused quite a bit on the structure, the format of your resume. At this point, we have shared a template. From what I hear from your advisors, everybody is using that template really effectively. So we're clear on how to format our resume. We're clear about the different sections, right? But today we're kind of going to discuss how to really optimize your resume. So with that, yeah, the focus for today is to do two things that I'm going to get into in just a moment. We're going to talk about our professional experience, and we are going to showcase our skills and contributions. Yeah, and really make sure that our achievements stand out. And we're going to do that in two different ways. So this is the section we're talking about here, your relevant experience. And we have two approaches for kind of really standing out. We're going to focus on using powerful verbs to start each bullet point in your resume. And we're also going to use meaningful metrics to quantify your accomplishments. So this is really kind of how to differentiate yourself. I think for many years, personally, I was listing the tasks that I did at my job or my responsibilities in ways that really didn't showcase my achievements, my impact, what I contributed to the company. So these are two really useful tools to make yourself stand out. Just trying to keep an eye on the chat here. And yeah, James agrees with me. This is something many of us do, right? Just bullet points of what we were responsible for. All right, so with that, how to use powerful verbs. I'm going to share in the chat. I have a little cheat sheet that we can refer to. Feel free to save this. It's really useful. Let me just grab my link here. All right. This is something we can use to reference, but let's talk through this a little bit. So using powerful verbs, and we're going to practice this together shortly in our breakout rooms. But before we do, I kind of want to give a couple of examples. All right. So we have two different ways of essentially saying the same thing. I've already kind of let you know which one's the good way of saying it and which one's the excellent way of saying it. But curious by somebody want to raise their hand, tell me a little bit about the difference between what we're seeing on the left versus what we're seeing on the right here. Sandra, go ahead, talk to me.
Okay. Well, on the right, it does tell literally what that person did as part of a 3-developer team, but it's not really taking ownership of their role in that team. So on the other side, you've got these strong verbs: developed and launched a fintech credit app, and enabled and signed chores, and incentivized children with allowance. So, but it just sounds like they own their role, and almost like they're proud of exactly what they produced. And then those power verbs are eye-catching.
Yeah, for sure. I think oftentimes, right, many of us are careful about ascription and who's getting credit, and we don't want to act like we did the whole thing when there were other people contributing, but there are really thoughtful ways that you can kind of frame your work that are still very strong and highlight your achievements without taking credit for stuff that others contributed to, right? So I think that's kind of the difference that I noticed between these two sides. Ephraim, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Oh yes, so I see the difference. Basically one is so the first, instead of saying part of a 3-developer team, one is in the past tense, is using action verbs, developed and launched. And it just seems like the one on the right is taking more initiative and taking more ownership of what they actually did. So when you said develop and launch a fintech CRUD app to enable parents to assign chores and incentivize children with allowance, it seems like it has a call to action, which is the incentivize children, basically as a result of what they did as far as how they developed and launched an app. So yeah.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. I would agree. There, you can, like you said, really see the impact of the work that they did. They start strong, developed and launched. Even something about the, like you said, the tense there. And there's no way that you're required to write your resume in terms of like the tense that you use. But I would almost agree that in this sense, just the fact that it's written in the past tense sounds like, oh, they did that, right? Like there's something interesting there that kind of, there's that small nuance that suggests a sense of accomplishment. So yeah, let's see. And yeah, anyone else want to tell me a little bit more? We can look at both of the items there, that second one. Instead of saying managed a team of drivers, supervised a team of multi-shift drivers. Wesley, tell me your thoughts.
Felt very in kind of in the same veins as Ephraim was talking about. It's kind of you're active instead of passive. Like part of it. It felt like a passive sort of quality that I had was I was a part of, instead of, hey, this is active. I developed it. I launched it with a group of people. But if these are, like you said, action verbs, it's just this shows that there was, as he said, an initiative. I was, that there is something, that this is ingrained, like this was ingrained, or I put my fingerprints on this part of the job.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really taking ownership, showing how you contributed and showing the impact of your work. And which is not to say that the side that we labeled as good as opposed to excellent, there's anything wrong in it of itself, right? But we do see that slight difference between these two different ways of framing the same exact kind of work contributions, but one just reads much more powerfully than the other. I'm going to keep it moving in just a moment because I do want to get to everything. No, Christian, go ahead. I'll take a last word from you on this point.
I just wanted to comment on the excellent component of the second example. There's quantifiable data to showcase by how much did they improve this aspect of their role. So there's a measurable difference in what they did, so that you could highlight your strength by showing, yeah, I did this by 20%. So to show a prospective employer, like, yeah, I can get things done.
Absolutely. Recruiters, hiring partners, love to see that, like a quantifiable amount, right? So we're going to talk a little bit more about that shortly. But in the meantime, let's quickly practice together. So I want you guys to take a quick look at these things that we jotted down right here, and we'll quickly go through each of them. Can someone tell me how they might rewrite the first sentence to be a little bit more powerful? Yeah, Peter, go ahead.
One thing, manage data entry and report generation for the sales team. So I would put reported, but we're still going to change those verbs, but just not having it consistent. It sounds kind of weak. So like manage data entry and reported generation for the sales team. And then something more dynamic, I suppose, supervised or streamlined or performed generation for the sales team. Just better, I'd say better verbs, action verbs, powerful verbs.
Yeah. And again, yeah, managed is not a bad word. I don't want to suggest that it is, but there might be a way to just make that a little bit, to strengthen it a little bit, right? So, Paul, you have a suggestion? How might you reword this?
Led data entry, and maybe go a little deeper into data entry. So if you were able to automate some part of it, or you were able to come up with some template so that people can use, a way for other people in your work to help with data entry. Yeah. Overall, I would say that that sentence is quite short, so just elaborating more on it would be helpful.
Yeah, which is not to say that there's any problem with brevity. I think oftentimes brevity can be great for your resume, but there is opportunity to maybe provide a little bit more context there, right? Let's skip on to the next one. Worked on a team to develop and implement a new project management system. Ephraim, how might you rephrase that?
Yeah, it's similar to the first one. What I would do is like keep the same words, but also have some type of like numbers associated with it. So work on the team to develop and implement a new product system. So worked on the team of X amount of people, and developed and implemented a new project management system that resulted in this, and in a particular, and what the project management system actually end up doing. So if it end up saving money, or if it end up cutting costs, if it end up increasing efficiency within the project, I would attach a number to that, and that's how I would state that.
Yeah, love that. Yeah, I will say worked on, not super powerful. I hate to say that certain phrasing is bad, but avoid using the term worked on. It's just not super powerful. There's other things you could do there. Even like spearheaded new project management system with a team of 3 others that, yeah, again, something like how it optimized or created more efficiency, right? Use a stronger word than worked on. Worked on is just not the one, right? All right, last one, created Excel spreadsheets to track project progress and budget. Many of us have done work like that. How can we say it to make sure that we're standing out? James.
For created Excel, I would probably put like designed Excel spreadsheets. So like created's good, but I think it's like eating a bland soup, right? Design sounds better because then it kind of shows that your brain is open. Like you're thinking outside the box. I designed. Oh, well, what else? Well, how did you design it? To track progress through progress and budgets, probably to track or not track. So designed Excel spreadsheets to balance project progress and budgets to increase efficiency by 20%.
Yeah, great. Love any opportunity to tell us how we're increasing efficiency. But yeah, designed is a great word there. And even like Excel spreadsheet, that's great to know. Excel, sometimes you'll find a job description that is specifically asking for Excel skills, right? But something like design project tracking system, even if what it is exists, not that we're lying, right? We're not going to lie on our resumes, but I don't care that it's Excel, right? Tell me that it's a system that you designed, and start with designed, something really strong. Great. So with that, oh, I didn't realize my next slide had some suggestions for how we might rephrase some of this. So I'll just post them quickly. These slides are available to y'all, but yeah, those are some suggestions for how you might readjust things. With that, we are going to hop into breakout rooms. Let's see, everybody has access to these slides. So make sure that we're using our breakout rooms effectively. At this point, we've been in them all the time. So just please be participating. We've got a group activity. We're going to spend 25 minutes in these breakout rooms. So either open up the slides on your end, take a screenshot right now so that you know what we're doing when we get there. And I'd like everyone to rewrite the statements that we've listed below and make sure that we are starting off strong with those powerful verbs. You can use the powerful verb cheat sheet that is available to you. And I did post it in the chat. Everybody has access to that. I will repost it. All righty. Great. Okay, so I'm going to open up breakout rooms in just a moment. I think what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to randomize these breakout rooms. we're going to do 4 breakout rooms. And for my REAP advisors that are on the call, I've made you co-host, so it's not going to push you off to a breakout room when I open them. But if you would like to each jump in a room or cycle through rooms, yeah, if you're available and willing and want to kind of see what's going on in these breakout rooms, that would be great. So let me get things started. We're all good. We all know what we're doing for the next 25 minutes. Great. Okay. I'm going to automatically close them in 25 and I will see you guys in a bit. Let's go. Eddie, did you get pushed to a breakout room? Oh, there we go. All right. Thanks so much, guys. Yeah, it's up to you. Are you guys available for the next 25 minutes and happy to kind of each hop into a room?
Yep.
Cool. All right. So in that case, maybe we'll just do, I got on my screen right now, Jennifer, maybe you'll do room number 1, Filippo, room number 2, and Sarah, you want to try 3?
Sounds
Cool.
good.
I'll hop in 4 in just a moment.
Okay.
Do you guys have any questions? Are we all good? Thank you so much for your panel discussion earlier.
Yeah.
Of course. Do we
Yeah,
just
I'm good, of course.
do we what do we
Observe,
do?
you can contribute
Okay.
to the conversation if people are feeling stuck or if you have suggestions for how they might they should have their screens open so that they're working on these sentences. But yeah, you can just make contributions or just observe.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, bullet point number 3. Who wants to tell me how you reworked updated databases? Ephraim.
Oh, I wasn't writing it down. But Wes, can you tell her what we came up with? Wes?
Came up with maintained databases and constructed graphs for client presentations.
Ooh, very good, very good. I actually rewrote similar sentence, maintained, and again, as River said before, feel free to plug in a placeholder for these. So I just had maintained XYZ databases, created 3 dynamic graphs about such and such presentation, right? So yeah, throwing in some good words there. Who's got a rework for our 4th bullet point? Checked data accuracy. Paul, go ahead.
Verified data and created key performance indicators to meet project deadlines.
Yeah, throwing in the KPI there. Love it. Love it. We got some buzzwords going on. All right. And for our final bullet point here, do I have a volunteer? This one in my breakout room, we were talking about how we did not give you a great example to work from. Managed trends is like an interesting little pairing of words there. So I'm interested to see how you guys reworked that. Don't leave me hanging. Come on. I know we got some. Paul, you want to go again? Is your hand still up? So yeah, you are Christian.
Sure. Christian, take it away.
Without further ado, we wrote targeted trends and design dashboards to facilitate executive decision making.
Very good. Yeah. that's much stronger than tracked trends or managed trends. Tracked would still be a great word, but yeah, that's very good. With that, any last thoughts, comments, concerns? Cool, we'll keep it moving then. All right, so now I think we touched on this just a little bit before, talking about kind of quantifying your experience, telling your story through numbers, right? And we're going to talk a little bit more about how to do this, and then we have a group activity for you. So with that, all right, so storytelling. You might ask, how can you show your skills when you're looking for your first position? And the truth is that recruiters or hiring managers are going to focus on the effort that you put into quantifying your impact, right? Rather than just the actual numbers themselves, but just showing that you made some sort of significant contribution. So although you might feel like, I don't know what my metrics are or were, recruiters and hiring managers are focusing on the effort that you're putting in and how you're telling this story. So everything has potential to be quantified. And I think the example one of our advisors gave us earlier on the panel, I'm forgetting now if it was Sarah or Jennifer, but somebody talked about even the things that feel rather passive can be quantified. I did this thing where I was checking expiration dates and it ensured that we had no deaths, no liabilities, right? Something like that. That's something that I hadn't thought of before, but that's a great way of taking something that might feel like not very quantifiable and adding some sort of metric to it, right? So I love that example, and we are going to think through other ways to quantify. So with that, again, we have a couple of examples up for you. So all of this information is valuable and can give potential employers a sense of what role you served, what it entailed. But what we're seeing on the left doesn't really provide specific details about your accomplishment or your impact, right? So let me get some volunteers here. Can I have somebody read off the left side versus the right side? Ephraim, are you my only friend participating tonight? I'm calling on some other folks. I'm sorry. I love to hear your voice, but I want to hear from some voices I haven't heard. Draquan,
Yeah.
talk to me. Tell me a little bit about the left side versus the right side for this example.
Okay, so on the left side, it says served food and drinks to customers and ensured their orders were accurate. So looking at the right side of it, like the left side pretty straightforward, just telling them what they did or whatever. But like the right side of it, kind of like it give you an idea of how they delivered it, you know, the time, and I guess all of that play a role in it. Like you in a restaurant or something, you serving customers, the smile, the energy, and all of that. I guess on the right side, it's kind of like explaining more.
Yeah, the right side gives you a little bit more to work with. And I do understand that for some roles, you might feel like you don't have the data to come up with those metrics, but sometimes we do have that data and we just have to dig deeper, right? I worked in the service industry for many years and we used to hand out a comment card with our bill, right? So maybe I can't come up with a 100% accurate kind of percentage on how my customers rated me, but I do have a general idea that, again, like this example, 95% of my customers were satisfied or I got positive feedback from. Also, in some cases, you know, if you're working in the service industry, your tips might be indicative of how people appreciated your service, right? So there are ways to kind of find metrics that you can build in. Other times, even if you're at a job, right, sometimes your manager will share that information with you, especially in the service industry, right? Or in retail industry. I know when I worked in both of those, I can remember kind of like talking to managers and them pretty much being very forthcoming and transparent about sharing information there, where it's like, oh, our sales are up 30% today compared to the same day last year, right? So there are opportunities to kind of get some of that information. And then, yeah, again, that second example, maintained a clean and organized workspace. And we've just added a little bit more to it in terms of the impact that you had. So training or mentoring other wait staff is a great way to kind of illuminate your managerial skills or potential transferable skills. And in this case, we've added some metrics there. We talk about the 3 new wait staff that someone trained and reduction in customer complaints. So these are ways to kind of add to the impact of the bullet points that you're putting on your resume. Yeah, James.
I also remembered from the last cohort, we were talking about this and you mentioned, make it a believable number. Don't make it like one where they're actually going to have to fact check your percentages. You know, you don't want to sit there and be like my job, for example, I increased productivity through the whole plant by 100% just by being there. They're going to be like, do you have the facts here? Let me
Show me the receipts. Yeah.
Let me get the numbers of what you produced. So, you know, be modest about it. At the same time, don't undersell it yourself, but don't be so cocky and overconfident that you oversell yourself at the same time.
Yeah, and if there's an area where you simply don't have the data, then maybe that's not an area where you choose to add certain metrics, right? But if there's something that you can confidently say, I really did make that quantifiable kind of contribution, then that's a place to highlight it. Yeah, Sandra, go ahead.
Would it be all right to say like approximately?
I think it is.
Increase, you know, just to make it a round number.
Yeah, I think absolutely. If you have an approximate number, you can definitely feel free to go with that. Like I know, again, I keep comparing to my own work experience, right? But I did hospitality management and restaurant management for many years. And I have a general number of how I increased sales while I was working in a particular role doing like a rooftop venue. And yeah, I can tell you about the marketing that we did and how I increased the revenue over the course of a single summer. And okay, I might have increased revenue by 27.2%, but better believe I'm going to put 30% or whatever it is, 25%. I'm going to go with probably a round number because it just feels better. If you have the accurate number and you know for sure what it is, it's totally okay to not put a round number too, right? But yeah, just finding opportunities where you can insert a metric, I think can be really helpful and make you stand out. So with that, oh, Ephraim, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I know you're tired of hearing my voice, but
I'm not tired. That's not what I meant. I just wanted to call
But my question to you is like, I know numbers is good, but what about like policy as well? Like for instance, if you had some type of influence over some type of policy or implemented some type of like company culture or implemented some type of like a company outing or something like that, or just a volunteer effort. Is that something?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's something worth highlighting. And I do think, though, that oftentimes if you dig enough in that area, you can come up with a quantity too, right? If you changed policy, oftentimes you can kind of reflect on what was the impact of that policy change. Did it mean that? And again, sometimes you might not be in the position where you know the actual data point there, but maybe you started some sort of initiative among your team members, and even if you do a survey, right, increased team morale or team satisfaction by this much or something, right? If you can find a metric, I think it makes it even more impactful. But which is not to say don't include something if it doesn't have a metric. There are times when you simply will not have the data point, and I think there's still areas worth highlighting even if you can't come up with a real quantity. So yeah, with that, ways to quantify experience, you can quantify work, number of people involved. Sometimes this can be really appealing, right? Hiring managers love to see how many people were impacted, how many invites went out, how many mailers, how many emails were opened because of something that you changed, right? Click-through rates, stuff like that. If there's a way where you can add a number there, certainly do. You can also talk about your time commitment. I mean, I don't love this example. This is a silly example. We say worked 16 days nonstop. Let's ignore that one. I don't think that's a great example. Also, though, the amount of revenue, profit, sales, that is the biggest one probably that business owners love to see. Everybody's concerned about their bottom line, want to know how you contributed in dollars and cents. So if you have the opportunity to add that, that's a great one to put on your resume. And cost reduced, right? So money saved or cost saved. Again, any sort of reduction can also be quantified. And then a process that you streamlined. A lot of times we can equate this to efficiency, right? So there's a way to say that this saved a certain number of hours because you automated a certain feature, or you created something that could be done asynchronously, right? So yeah, opportunities to highlight efforts that have been successful in streamlining processes. James, go ahead.
I think for probably work 16 days straight, not that one. But if you said was awarded for attendance,
Perfect.
put an award out there, because one guy sat there and said that just by talking to him at my job, he said he didn't get any missed loads in the first 9 months that he was there, and he got an award, which was a jacket. He has an award to show for it, but it wasn't. Yeah, because the work 16 days straight nonstop tells me that, well, then you don't have
Work-life balance,
you're
right?
you're a workaholic, and that could be a problem.
Yeah, yeah. I think the point that you touched on, though, is you said something about, oh, he was regularly in attendance, didn't miss days, and because of that, there was never a missed order. That's where I would really add the quantity in that case, right? Like ensured that whatever it is, 250 orders were successfully delivered within this timeline or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a great opportunity to kind of add a quantity. I'm going to quickly look at the chat. Oh, people are being funny here in the chat, talking about ranges, floats, integers. All right, love it, love it. Some clever coders we got over here. All right, I've got another activity for you. Let me check the time before I send you off. Oh, we're almost at time. I'm only going to send you off for 10 minutes then. So yeah, let's go into breakout rooms. It says 20 minutes. I'll call you back in 10. You're going to brainstorm about which part of your experiences. So again, reflect on kind of some of the resume materials that you've put together so far. And this will be a casual discussion, right? But each of you can kind of take a turn talking about a resume bullet point where you might be able to enhance your communication by talking about a number or adding a metric somewhere in there. And then yeah, you can use the materials that we've provided so far. So I will open up these breakout rooms again and call you back in 10 minutes, just so that we have a couple of minutes to debrief before I send you on your way. Let me get these open. All right, I'll see you in a few. Alrighty, welcome back. So in the last couple of minutes, can I get 1, 2, maybe 3 volunteers? If anyone was able to kind of look at their own resume and just transform one of their bullet points there by adding some sort of quantity, I would love to hear about what you did. Rico, go ahead.
A topic that we just discussed inside of our group was filling the gap of incarceration for some people that's been incarcerated and being able to make that gap not look so negative. So I encourage some of the people inside of my group to utilize some of the experience in prison, some of the things that they use to better themselves. For me, I took wastewater treatment and water treatment. So I used my last 3 years of incarceration to say I was the laboratory technician for Chillicothe's wastewater and water treatment instead of, but I was in prison for that portion. But we talked about encouraging others to use some of the certifications and some of the highlights of when you were incarcerated to kind of fill that gap.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. That's great advice there. And we are going to spend more time talking about that particular thing that you just touched on there, right? I know that we all have that same experience of trying to think through creatively how we're going to, make sense of that gap within our resume. And I love the advice that you shared there. I think that's a great point. So yeah, glad that was useful to discuss that. I'm wondering, is there anyone that had come up with a example of kind of taking something on their resume and adding a quantity to it? Wesley, go ahead.
Yeah, I like I said in my group we had, like I said, I was expressing how to quantify productivity and not bragging, not wanting to brag about it, but then also not over exaggerating where it makes sense, it makes more sense. So I had spoken on my previous employer who told, like I said, I just asked him because he actually had the raw data as far as what I did, where I came from, and I was able, like I said, I was able to put in, hey, for my, developing, methods and instituting like technical direction, and then that increased productivity by 40%. So it wasn't something where, I came up with. It made it a lot easier for me, like going up and asking him, and he gave me that number.
Yeah, for those of you who, that's great advice, Wesley. For those of you who are actively working, especially if you have a good relationship with whoever your direct supervisor is, do take advantage of that relationship and ask if there are areas where you might be able to collect a data point. Because again, we don't want to be lying, we don't want to be exaggerating, but if it's just that you're not privy to that data, but you have an opportunity to maybe gain access to it through somebody that you work with, then yeah, absolutely leverage those connections and ask for that data. And yeah, I love the conversation around efficiency. I think for many of us, that is an area where we have the potential to add some sort of quantity. For myself, I was just kind of looking at my own resume to think through, oh man, am I actually walking the walk and talking the talk, doing what I tell you all to do? And I will say, it's okay if not every single bullet point has a metric associated with it, but do think creatively about where you can add them. And I think efficiency is one of the areas where I was just looking at my resume, and something that I did recently, and you guys might know about this through doing our pre-course, right? Especially those of you that were in the foundation, is that you guys received, especially our foundation folks, you guys received a lot of videos from me leading up until the foundation program, our orientation. And that's an area where I can say, something like, I forget exactly how I worded it, but like pioneered or innovated a scalable asynchronous pre-course curriculum that reduced, I don't know, live in-person instructor-led sessions by 30% or whatever it is, right? Over the course of a year, if all of that material is evergreen and truly scalable where I can just reuse it, it means that now I've reduced the need to kind of have you guys sit in on an extra week of orientation by sending out those materials that are already created and just need to be repurposed every time we start a cohort. So yeah, that's an area where I'm trying to think through the best way to kind of frame my ability to kind of be more efficient and add a metric there. I am rambling now, and it is past 8:30, so I'm going to let everybody jump. Thanks for a great session. I'm going to hang out for 5 minutes. If anybody wants to chop it up, give me some feedback, chat for a minute, I'm here. But otherwise, I hope, oh, is it? No, it's not Thursday, it's Wednesday. All right, we'll see you back tomorrow then. I won't, but someone will. Enjoy your night.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Have a good night, Lana. Thanks,
All right.
everybody.
Take
Advisors.
care. Yeah, thank you to our advisors. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alana.
Yeah, enjoy your night. Everybody feeling good? This is you've all achieved full admission at this point. Everybody took their assessment and we're here, we're still standing, and I'm excited to see what's next for everyone. How's everyone feeling so far? Everything's going good with tech classes. We're all getting in the flow.
Getting there. My brain feels melty by the end of the day, though.
I'm sure it does.
Feels
Yeah.
like it's stretching. Does anybody else feel that? The melty feeling? Is it just me?
No,
But then you have those moments of feeling like a superhuman, I'm sure, when you have the aha moment and something clicks.
I know they're coming.
They're coming. They're coming. If they haven't yet, they're coming, I promise. And you'll feel
I love
so
that yet
good.
word.
And
Yeah, I
don't
love
worry though, because they'll come, and then shortly after you'll be like, shit, I feel like I know nothing again, right? You go through these peaks and valleys of feeling superhuman, followed by feeling frustrated. But that's kind of the beautiful dance of becoming a software engineer, or learning any new skill, really. But I think it's particularly true with coding.
I'm realizing that.
Yeah,
But I can live with uncertainty.